Hi, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, unwanted pets and relatives. It's Mr. Palumbo here. Today I want to talk about something I call the 5 founding fathers. Say that slow. Now, in my class, most especially my 8th grade class, we do a whole unit on the founding fathers. And one thing I like to do is have the kids write a short essay. They wouldn't think it's short, but write a short essay on a chosen founding father's life. And also at the end of this essay, identify characteristics or virtues that this individual showed in his life that the student either respects or shares with this individual or would like to emulate from this individual. The 5 founding fathers we will be looking at today are James Madison, Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and George Washington. Now, obviously, there's more founding fathers than just these 5, but I've chosen them for specific reasons. I hope I can show how important each one of these individuals were to the founding of the country. And since I always tell my students to come up with characteristics or virtues, I'm going to try to come up with some of my own for each of these individuals. Now, we're not trying to idolize or worship these individuals or somehow turn them into mythological heroes. In fact, by researching their lives and connecting with some of their virtues and characteristics, we are making them more human. And I also think as young people, we should connect with our past. These are men that did great things for the country, and we should know about them. And as we grow up and we become the leaders of the next generation, maybe we can do some of these same things. Let's get started. Of all the founders, George Washington is probably the most prone to mythology. Know the prayer at Valley Forge, or his admission to chopping down the cherry tree as a boy, probably didn't happen. He was such an intriguing and honorable and amazing person during his lifetime. Washington was a natural leader who possessed amazing courage during battle. He gained some fame during the French and Indian War when it is said that 2 horses were shot out from underneath him and several bullet holes were in his clothes, but he walked away unscathed. During the Battle of Princeton, the stressed and beleaguered militia were beginning to retreat, and General Washington rallied the troops by running in front of the front lines and rallying his troops just 30 yards from enemy musket fire. Incredibly, throughout his military service, Washington was never wounded in battle, again elevating his American legend status. After the war, he resigned his commission to Congress, an action that again gave him great fame. Many generals throughout history have used their armies to overthrow the government and place themselves in power. Not Washington. He did no such thing. When King George III heard that Washington was going to resign his commission and give power back to the colonies, he said if he does this, he will be considered one of the greatest men in history. After the war, Washington returned to his farm in Virginia, but his services would soon be needed again to reside as president of the Constitutional Convention. Once the Constitution was ratified, Washington was nominated to be the first president of the United States of America. He was unanimously elected to 2 terms. Leaving office in 1797, he died only 2 years later in 1799. George Washington is my personal favorite of the founders. Definitely a hero of mine, someone of a role model, someone you can look up to. Here's a guy that was just born to be a leader. He wasn't the most eloquent with his words. He wasn't the most educated. His reading and writing were very fundamental. They say he probably had a 6th to 8th grade education. But here's a guy that led the country, put the country first. And here's a guy, just by his sheer character, brought people together for the betterment of the country. A Virginian like Washington and Madison, Thomas Jefferson was a true Renaissance man. He dabbled in everything from science to agriculture to architecture, and he practiced law. Upon the adoption of Henry Lee's Independence Resolution in May of 1776, Jefferson was selected, along with Ben Franklin and John Adams, to a 5-person committee tasked with writing the Declaration of Independence, which would be sent to King George III in London. Jefferson spent 2.5 weeks toiling over the document from sunup to sundown. And according to Monticello.org, he used no other books or writings when creating this document. However, the philosophy of John Locke can easily be witnessed throughout the final document. Jefferson lists 27 specific grievances against the king and Great Britain, and he uses these to prove that the king has been unjust and cruel to the colonies and has therefore lost his legitimate right to rule over America. It is the document's preamble, however, that has crystallized the American ethos for nearly 235 years. With words like, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Having a vision is important. You need, if you're moving in a direction, you need people to give you a voice, to give you a mission, and to give you goals and ideals. And Thomas Jefferson did that for us. Here in modern times, Thomas Jefferson seems to get quite the bad rap. People like to point out that though he's the one that penned "All men are created equal," he held slaves until his death. I think Thomas Jefferson is a good example of us, people that we have higher value, we hold to higher values and principles, but we're also hypocrites, and we live in a world of irony and hypocrisy. But I think Thomas Jefferson gives us that opening principle. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Now, that might not have played out exactly correct in the beginning, but if you see U.S. history from that point on, we end up rising to that ideal. Eventually, we end up getting to this place where, yes, all people deserve rights, all people deserve equality. John Adams was from Massachusetts of Puritan descent. He was an accomplished lawyer who defended the British soldiers charged with killing colonists during the Boston Massacre. This move was very unpopular with the people of Boston, and Adams drew sharp criticism, but he believed that all men should be treated equal under the law. John Adams was known to be disagreeable at times, which probably assisted in his only serving one term as president. But it's what Adams did behind the scenes that made him invaluable to the founding of America. Adams served in the Continental Congress during the war and was the one who nominated George Washington as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. Before that, he was selected to be on the drafting committee for the Declaration of Independence, and he was runner-up to Jefferson as the person people thought should write the document. After the war, he helped start the movement to replace the Articles of Confederation with something more manageable. This something would end up being the U.S. Constitution. He would later be the first Vice President and the second President of the United States. After Washington's departure from public life, Adams became the de facto leader of the Federalist Party. John Adams teaches us that some things are greater than personal glory and recognition. John Adams does kind of get the bad end of the stick here, historically speaking. You don't see any monuments in Washington, D.C. to John Adams. But John Adams is integral in every process of the birth of our nation. He's part of the committee that writes the Declaration of Independence. He nominates George Washington as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. John Adams was also a diplomat. He was vice president. He did a lot of things behind the scenes, which again should teach us that some causes are greater than personal glory and fame. Standing barely 5 feet tall and possessing a very soft-spoken manner, James Madison certainly wasn't the most intimidating man. In May of 1787, 56 delegates met in Philadelphia in an attempt to amend the failings of the Articles of Confederation. James Madison was a delegate from Virginia and was a fervent advocate for creating a new constitution. He was one of the driving forces behind the Virginia Plan, a plan that proposed several ideas such as bicameral houses, representation based on population, and separate but equal branches of government. Madison took many notes during the convention and worked with many of the other delegates from other states to find compromise on areas of concern. Once the proposed Constitution was agreed upon, Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, and James Madison wrote a series of essays arguing for the proposed Constitution's ratification. These essays became known as the Federalist Papers. The Constitution was adopted by the convention on September 17, 1787, and was distributed to the states for ratification and eventually became the law of the land. Being considered the father of our Constitution is a pretty big deal, especially since he didn't even have a law degree. That's pretty impressive. James Madison teaches us that if you have a goal, if you have an idea, don't ever give up on that goal or idea. I would say that James Madison was the key piece to seeing not only a new Constitution, but getting that Constitution passed with all the political challenges that come with it. I think James Madison is key to our constitutional republic. Without him and his tireless work, we may still be under the Articles of Confederation. Who knows? Born in Boston in 1706, Benjamin Franklin was one of 10 children. At the age of 12, he was apprenticed to his brother James at the print shop. It was grueling work. Benjamin helped with setting the type, composing pamphlets, and selling the papers out in the street. Ben and his brother were always at odds, so finally he decided to run away. He arrived in Philadelphia and purchased some bread rolls with the remaining money he had in his pockets. After a few more apprenticeships, Benjamin finally went out on his own and started his own print shop. He quickly became known for his solid work ethic and quality print materials. By 1749, his business ventures became so successful he was able to retire early. He began to focus on science and invention, and he was predominantly focused on inventing things and discovering things that would help the betterment of society. By the late 1750s, Franklin had found himself abroad in England as a colonial representative. He was famous at this point, and many in London found him intriguing and a bit of a novelty. However, he learned a lot about European politics from his time there. Though he was kind of a late bloomer to the independence movement, Franklin finally realized that there was going to be no reconciling with England. He became a valuable member of the Colonial Congress, and he gave advice and insight on European politics, and he helped write the Declaration of Independence. I love Benjamin Franklin's story, and I'm really tempted to put entrepreneurship as his virtue or his characteristic. But I guess entrepreneurship isn't really a virtue. So I chose statesmanship here, but let me share with you what I like about Benjamin Franklin. I tell my kids every year, Benjamin Franklin is the first American dream story. Here's a guy that started with nothing, worked his way to early retirement and a successful career. He was able to retire early, and then he set his sights on science and invention. And he was a very big philanthropist. He believed in public libraries. He believed in public hospitals. And because he was retired and because of the American dream allowed him to be successful, he was allowed to be a statesman. Now, you're saying, well, what's a statesman? Well, we don't really have many of those today, unfortunately. But what I think Franklin brought to the table was experience, counsel, and the worldview. He spent a lot of time in England. He had a worldview, and he had great insight on how to get a fledgling bunch of colonies to stick together, win a war, and become a country. And if Benjamin Franklin did not succeed beforehand through his personal ventures and become wealthy and successful, he might not have ever been able to then use the rest of his time to work for his country and be a statesman. Oh, it's Rambo. Hi, Rambo. I hope this video is up to your standards. Please, what else do you want? Just don't pull your knife out. What else do you want? Please tell me.
I want what they want. And every other guy who came over here and spilt his guts and gave everything he had once for our country to love us as much as we love it. That's